Welcome everyone to this presentation on the dynamics of ego states. This is intended for TA advanced learners. At the end of listening to this video, you will be able to identify the psychic organizers. You will be able to list and briefly describe the types of psychic energy. You'll be able to identify and differentiate psychic organizers from psychic determinants. Will be able to describe the process and dynamics of ego state manifestation moment by moment. You will be able to describe briefly the connection between TA therapy and the ego state model. This animated slide is showing you how the psychic organizers form in a person. Archeopsych is the oldest part in our personality. It is sensitive to feelings, has magical thinking, and reflects behaviors. As the brain structures mature, the neopsych and the exteriopsych almost simultaneously develop. Neopsych develops the ability to observe for oneself. Exteriopsych incorporates information from outside. Each of them has a social manifestation called the child ego state, adult ego state, and the parent ego state. This diagram shows the specific regions of the brain hypothesized to be the seat of the different psyche organs. All the brain regions are fully formed at birth, but networking and development of insulation of the nerve cells happens only after birth. It is very important for protective and data processing functions. So major structural changes after birth happens in the neocortex and the exterior cortex regions. How and which ego state manifests is decided by the state of the ego state boundaries, the state of mental health or personal effectiveness of the concerned person, the nature of the cathexis of energy in the ego states, and the congruence of ego states or personality that is being expressed. Cathexis is a Greek word which means to hold. In psychoanalysis, Freud used this word to denote pathology of psychic energy, which may be pathologically held and expressed in unhealthy or ineffective ways. Byrne probably considered psychic energy analogous to the energy of engines which were coming out at his time. Byrne, being a trained psychoanalyst, borrowed this word to explain his concept of energy available in different parts of the personality. This is the TA way to explain ineffective behaviors he envisages bound, unbound, free, and free energies in different parts of the personality. Byrne describes two types of personality expressions. Real self is that part where maximum free energy is expressed. Real self is what a person perceives himself or herself to be in a given state of action. The executive is that part of the personality which has unbound and free energies together highest in the level. In psychiatric illness, the real self and the executive may be in two different parts of the personality. Byrne says that in healthy mental state, the ego state boundaries are impermeable to bound and unbound cathexis. It is relatively permeable to free cathexis. Cathexis of energy will vary between ego states depending on the need of situations. The awareness and the cathecting ability of the adult ego state regulates the health of the person. Executive and real self is most often congruent in healthy people. TA theory says that mental ill health is the imbalanced and non-congruent functioning of ego states. As a result, in mental ill health, ego state boundaries are either impermeable or too permeable for free cathexis. Energy cathexis between ego states is either too slow or very poor. Adult ego state is either contaminated or excluded in varying degrees. The executive and the real self may be in different ego states or non-congruent in a mentally unhealthy situation. Byrne uses the analogy of a monkey sitting on the top of a tree to understand how the psychic energy functions. A monkey sitting on the top of a tree has potential or bound energy. A falling monkey has unbound energy. A monkey who decides to jump has free energy. So each of these ego states function in all these three ways, and that is what we discuss in the energy dynamics. Now let's look at what are the factors that affect the nature of a personality. Executive and real self may vary depending on the psychic state of the person, either healthy, psychotic or neurotic. Psychic state at a given time depends on the cathectic capacity of the ego states. It depends on the permeability of boundaries between the ego states, and it also depends on the forces acting on each of the ego states. So we can see how the phenomenon of the ego states manifest. Ego states are manifested moment by moment by each of the psychic organs, depending on the content or the structure of the organs, the energy dynamics between them, and the impact of the determinants on the organs. In Burns' theory, there are two ideas, psychic organizers and psychic determinants. What is referred to as psychic determinant is the ability of each of the organs to influence each other. The exterior psyche manifests as parent ego state and influences other ego state as social canons or social programming. The neopsych manifests itself as adult ego state. It influences the other ego states as probability programming. The archeopsych manifests itself as the child ego state. It influences the neopsych and the exterior psyche as a natural programming or biological programming. Byrne has very clearly connected his concept of psychic determinants to the Freudian idea of psychic agencies. He equates archeopsych to id, which is the earliest biological programming, and neopsych to ego, which is the probability programming, and exterior psyche is equated to superego, which is the external programming. Another way of understanding the psychic determinants is probably that they may be the organizer where there is free energy available. Now it's time to do the exercise. Please stop the video and draw the psychic organizers and label them, and identify and list the psychic determinants. Now we are going to see some examples of how the determinants impact the organizers. When social canons impact the actively cathected neopsych, the adult ego state will be executive and a rational authority person presence. You can see here how it happens. Here we are seeing the manifestation of exterior psyche influenced by probability programming. The parent ego state will be executive and an authoritarian authority manifests. This animated picture showing how that happens. Here we are seeing the impact of different determinants on the exterior psyche. When the controlling parent is manifested, the exterior psyche itself is determining its influence on the exterior psyche. When the authoritarian authority manifests, it is the data processing that is influencing the exterior psyche. And when the biological programming influences, it is the nurturing parent. Here you can see the impact of the determinants on the adult ego states. When the social canons influence the neopsych, it is an ethical adult. When the probability programming influences the neopsych, it is a neutral data processor like adult. And when the biological programming influences, it's a feeling adult that we get. Look at the child ego state now. When the social canons influence, we get the adapted child. When the probability programming influence, we get the precocious child. And when the biological programming influences, we get the natural child. A summary of the previous slides are given here. These are only sample of the possible variations named using standard terminologies of ego states. There could be much more variety of manifestations because the contents of the or the structure of the ego states varies in different persons. Higher order ego states are ego states inside the ego states. The dynamics of ego state manifestations are also dependent on these deeper structures. We will learn about this in detail later. Here I am introducing the concept to invite you to think of the multiple ways in which ego state manifestations or psychodynamics happen socially. This animated picture illustrates how these influences may be working out. What is shown as practical reality illustrates a sample of the variety. The practical reality is contaminated and imbalanced ego states as well as second order structures. Now stop the video and draw a picture illustrating the interaction of determinants on one or all of the organizers, leading to different ego state manifestations or psychic phenomena. The objectives of TA therapy is given here to help you relate to the theory of ego states and its application in TA psychotherapy. Reflect and see if there is any clarification required. Please bring it up in the sessions. The steps include differentiating the adult ego state, strengthening the boundaries of the adult ego state, increasing the cathexis of the adult ego state, facilitating cathectic capacity of the child ego state, absolutely and relatively. That includes regression analysis and deconfusion of child. The patients usually intuitively recognize these principles and facilitate the process along with the therapist. It needs to be remembered that parental influence determines whether adapted or natural child is cathected during therapy. Thank you for listening. Thank you for doing the exercises. Please do come up with any questions if you have.